As the trial has started, Tommy's witnesses are being shot down and seem to be unreliable sources by Raymond's incredible lawyer skills. Meanwhile, at home, Rusty learns the truth about Barbara's relationship with Clifton, but that'll have to be resolved later, as Rusty may need a new lawyer after what happens to Raymond at the end of this episode. As it is time for us to discuss and break down episode 6, titled The Elements. Spoilers ahead. We open this episode with Rusty having what looked to be an out-of-body experience as he walks around the courtroom, and we hear the media talking about Tommy's strong opening statements. As Rusty makes his way to the stand, he grabs the medical examiner and shares his thoughts about him before snapping back into the actual scene of the doctor describing Carolyn's death wounds. Now, was it me, or was that opening scene kind of hinting at the possibility of Rusty having these type of out-of-body experiences where he wants to let his anger out, but then he snaps back in place and doesn't realize what just happened? Which makes me really kind of reconsider all those nightmares and flashbacks we've seen of him and Carolyn when things got physical. As we hear the details of Carolyn's death and how she died of bleeding to death. We also hear the time of her death would have been between the hours of 10 p.m. and 12 a.m. Now, remember the conversation between Rusty and Maya as he talked about the last time he was at Carolyn's house. As he said that he was at home at 11 p.m., meaning that he was at her house during that first hour of her expected time of death, but also means that he was home 1 hour before. As we get more details, we learn that Carolyn was hit from behind and fell face down and then hit twice in the head after. Now, based on that information, sounds like she turned her back on a person thinking that nothing violent was going to happen, and that person was someone that she must have trusted to turn her back on them, and assuming that there was a heated conversation. To hear that this person struck her twice after the first shot makes it seem that this was a murder with passion and anger. As Tommy leans into the fingernail clue, but also mentions how she bled out, indicating that she suffered, as he also points out that she was 6 weeks pregnant with Rusty's child. Now, Raymond shares his thoughts on the doctor's statements and points out the lack of evidence of having a murder weapon not having been recovered yet. As the doctor talks about Rusty's visit the day that Carolyn's body came in and describes his behavior as being off. Now, Raymond pushes back and calls out how the doctor is biased because of his relationship with Rusty. Raymond doesn't stop there as he continues to press the doctor about his other relationships with other attorneys, as we watch the doctor kind of lose his cool on the stand as he brings up Raymond's most recent loss on the re-election. Now, the doctor losing his cool just proves Raymond's point that the doctor can be quick to anger and that his statements towards Rusty can be misguided. Now, just taking a brief overview and looking at day 1 of the trial, I can't lie, Tommy's opening statements were pretty great. He came out of the gate swinging, but also Raymond did a good job of disapproving the doctor's biased opinion towards Rusty. So right now, I would say Team Rusty at 1 and Team Tommy at 1, making it an even playing field so far. But I do want to call out the remark about the anger behind Carolyn's death 6 episodes into this series. Let me know in the comments, who do we believe could have acted in such rage and violence but also have the wherewithal to clean up the evidence after? Now, I'll talk about this more in depth a little bit later in the breakdown, but for the first time in this season, I think that 2 people actually could have been involved in Carolyn's death. Right now, where my head is at, going off of last week's episode and talking about what happened in this episode, I'm thinking that what if Barbara and Kyle were involved? One of them attacking Carolyn and one of them calling the other person. For example, Kyle could have killed her, but then he called his mom and Barbara cleaned it up, very similar to what she did to the bike. So let me know what you guys are thinking after those statements of someone having the anger to kill her, but also having the smarts to clean it up after. As we see Nico and Tommy agree to disagree on what transpired, as Tommy's position is that even though the doc had his outburst on the stand, it still shows that this family man Rusty that everyone loved isn't what people expected. Now, another point that was interesting in this conversation was the whole fingernail situation and why it took so long for them to get the results. As it seemed to me that Nico's very suspicious about how everything came about and why it wasn't an initial report. Are we starting to feel like Nico feels as though Tommy might have set this up, that it could be fake evidence that Tommy had with the doc? As Raymond speaks with Rusty and Barbara about what's to come and how they should react moving forward, especially as it pertains to their body language. As Raymond's idea is to make it seem that Rusty is Barbara's protector, which she doesn't like this idea, and she wants to have the jury know that she is shocked about the situation and she wants to be authentic. As Maya shares her 2 cents on the situation.
Trials often come down to storytelling. Best version wins, and you are part of our story here. And your fury isn't going to carry the day.
As Barbara responds by telling her,
"It is very difficult for me to be in that room. I am there at all. Tells the jury that I believe in my husband's innocence."
Now, Barbara definitely seemed to have a more passive-aggressive tone to her in this particular situation when she's reminding them that this is the darkest hour of her life and she won't be pretending for nobody of what she's going through at this moment. As we head into day 2 of the trial, we hear from Jeremy Buck, who's considered by Raymond to be one of the best forensics in his field. As Jeremy Buck shares that not only was Rusty's fingerprints found, but also his saliva was found on her clothing as well. But he also points out that it was strange that the rope didn't have any DNA on it, considering how messy the murder was. Now, even though Maya and Raymond were against using Bunny Davis' case in this situation, we see that Raymond brings it up in this day of the trial. But unfortunately, bringing this up doesn't really work at the moment, as the judge calls both sides to the stand because Liam threats to Carolyn after his sentencing isn't very tangible in her eyes. As we continue, we learn more about what type of skin was found under her fingernails, and it was cells. As Raymond makes a point about how Rusty's DNA could have been found. Yet again, Raymond is playing great at the defense thus far and has, in my eyes, successfully managed to make both witnesses by the prosecutor's statements and observations look weak. And as far as day 2 is concerned, I'm going to give this win to Rusty and Raymond's team. As we cut to the Savage house, where we see Barbara going into her little art studio in the backyard. Now, it could be me, but it seems like she hasn't been here in quite a while, as we see her kind of cleaning up a little bit and she begins to work on a new piece. Now, my immediate thoughts after seeing this moment was this scene wasn't just a random scene. First thing is, this door was locked. Now, of course, it's most likely a space for her to get away from her family, but it's also a great place to hide a murder weapon. Again, I don't think this is just a throwaway scene and just showing us that she has her own little art studio to get away from everything going on with the trial. I think that this will have important implications moving forward. Like, I think this particular location, like I mentioned, may or may not be a good place to hide a murder weapon. As we head into day 3 of the trial, we see that Eugenia is brought to the stand and is questioned by Tommy if she was aware of the affair. Now, she admits to the jury that she was aware of this affair after seeing Rusty and Carolyn kissing in his office on a late night in February. She also recalls a conversation that seemed to be an argument between the two, as she said that she approached Rusty shortly after to let him know that she feels as though he's losing himself to her and becoming obsessive. But it doesn't stop there, as she also reveals that she wasn't a fan of Carolyn. But yet again, another witness backfires, as it is revealed that Carolyn never made a complaint about Rusty to HR, but has made a complaint about Tommy. As you can just feel the energy shift in the room when that was revealed. Now, this doesn't throw Tommy off, as he questions her on the stand about her claims about the complaint, as she says,
"All I know is that she didn't want to work on any cases with you. She said that you gave her ick."
Now, Tommy doesn't lose sight on her comments towards her saying Rusty came off obsessive and acting unprofessional towards Carolyn to get the attention back on Rusty. Now, I don't want to look past the fact that Eugenia made it very clear that she wasn't a fan of Carolyn. As I mentioned in my last breakdown, I think that there was some jealousy going on between her, and I think that we should definitely be keeping an eye on her moving forward. Now, I have to say, as an audience, we know that there's something going on with Tommy, and he's taking his case very personally with Rusty, and he doesn't like him. But after hearing about this HR complaint, it really adds fuel to my suspicions about Tommy. But as far as the court's concerned, I'm going to give the prosecutor their win on day 3, with the idea being planted in the jury's mind that Rusty was obsessed. Now, sticking with Tommy, for the first time this season, now while it was brief, we actually get to spend some alone time with him as he's headed home alone on the train to his house with his cat. Now, it could be wrong, but it doesn't appear that anyone lives with him, nor does he have pictures of family and friends on his wall. Look, there ain't nothing wrong with you living alone with pets, but it was interesting to see this side of him outside of the office and see him as a person. As we cut to seeing Lorraine saying that she actually kind of feels bad for Tommy to Raymond, as he says,
I remember, he's a fucking cockroach. You can't squish him. Keeps coming back.
Now, Raymond's feeling good about their chances with the lack of evidence and proof that definitely works towards Rusty's case, but he's also very much aware that if it comes to it, they can just simply pin it on someone, and that someone would be Rusty as of right now. Now, speaking of Rusty, we see him and his daughter Jaden, which, by the way, I don't know if I mentioned in previous videos before, but the casting of the kids are flawless to me. Like, I would imagine if Jake and Ruth actually had kids, they would look exactly like Jaden and Kyle. But anyway, this is a very important conversation being had about asking him if he's ever disassociated himself from his memories based on traumatic experiences. What she's basically saying in my eyes is, well, if you did kill her dad, did you completely go into shock and disattach himself from that moment because it was so traumatic? Now, a couple of things I want to point out about this scene. The idea of Rusty removing his memories based on shock is very fascinating to me, because we've seen this show give us moments of him having nightmares, him having this overwhelming feeling of guilt, and also the opening scene of this episode was him having this out-of-body experience. And of course, we can't neglect all the anger that we've seen from this character. So again, very interesting concept of this character Rusty having these moments where he's forgetting things because he's disassociated himself from these events. But another thing I want to point out about this scene is this is the second time that one of his kids has brought up and questioned his innocence. I'm having fun coming up with my crazy theories every week, but this one might actually have some weight. Now look, I've made the case of why Barbara could be the killer in previous videos as well as in this very video that we're talking about today, but hear me out. What if she covered for Kyle? Is there any possibility that maybe Kyle or Jaden killed her and they both did it together? One committed the crime and the other one cleaned it up. What do you all think about the possibility of Jaden and Kyle being responsible for Carolyn's death? Remember, Kyle was suggesting that his dad should take a plea deal, and now Jaden's saying that her dad might have these moments where he disattaches himself from experiences because they're so traumatic. And it's almost as if the kids are kind of planting a seed to make their dad think he did it, for they can use this as a way of getting back for having an affair on their mother. As we cut to seeing Barbara telling Rusty about what happened between her and Clifton, as Rusty takes his clothes and goes into the bathroom and comes out as she tells him that it was just a kiss and just a distraction. As Rusty laughs after making a sex joke and questions if they slept together and wants to also know why she's telling him this now. As Rusty pushes back and his anger starts to come out about her grinding him, and things take a turn when he grabs her and scares his own wife. Again, more and more of Rusty's anger is coming out as this show is went along, but as far as this scene goes, I am glad that her secret is finally out. Now, honestly, I don't have an ounce of sympathy for either character at this moment, but I will say that his reaction to being upset is understandable, but the grabbing is what crossed the line for me. But also want to point out that apparently months have passed since the last episode until now, which I found to be very interesting, so I'm assuming that nothing important happened between this episode and last. But share your opinion on this reveal, Rusty's reaction in the comments below. As we see Barbara telling Lorraine about the conversation she had with her husband about the kiss, as Lorraine wants to be more supportive and wants to join Barbara next time she goes to court. Now, the reason Barbara didn't go to court today wasn't exactly because of the fight they had the night before, but on this trial day, they're going to actually be sharing the conversation between Rusty and Carolyn as we see her telling Lorraine about the excessive number of times that he texted her the night of her death. As we head into the courtroom, we learn that Michael's father doesn't want his son to take the stand, as the judge also shares her 2 cents on how the trial's going so far, and she asks if both sides can agree to
This case is murder 2 at best, and you know it. Even your own witness testified there was likely an unplanned killing. You'll never get murder 1, and my instruction won't help you up that hill. The manslaughter seems like a good place to land.
As we see, neither side will accept, as she will allow Michael to take the stand, but with caution. As we end the episode with Rusty saying to Barbara,
"Why do you stay?"
Now let me know in the comments, do you believe their reasoning is because of how long they've been in a relationship, their kids, their family, and life that they built together? Or is there something else? Are they just so comfortable in the life that they built that they don't see a life outside of what they've built together? As we head into this 4th, possibly 5th day of the trial, we see Michael is indeed taking the stand, as he talks about the night that he took the photos and videos. Now Michael shares that he didn't have the best relationship with his mother, which confused him, so that made him go to her house unannounced, a routine a few times a month, to see the life that she lived without him. As Tommy brings up the meeting that took place between Rusty and Michael, it really plays on the fact that Michael sees Rusty as the one, and that's the man responsible for killing his mother. As the man from work conversation is brought up again, as Michael is making his impressions fact, and Raymond tries to convince the judge to correct him, but Raymond gets the chance to question him about his impressions. But as I mentioned in my last video, that something medically was going to probably derail this trial, and it looks like I was right, because after Raymond had that nightmare of his head exploding, he falls down to the ground, and the medics try to revive him, but it's not looking good. Now, this moment clearly has huge implications for this trial moving forward, regardless if Raymond lives or dies. Now, if he lives, there's no way he will medically be cleared to continue this trial, but if he dies, well, literally no way that he can continue this, and I would assume that Maya would replace him, or maybe even Rusty himself. Now, selfishly, I'm a Bill Camp fan. I hope that Raymond isn't dead. I hope that he comes back and he's alive, and I hope that he retires after this situation, and he gets to live this happy life with his wife. But I will remind you all that crazy theory that I threw out in my video last week, that what if Raymond is the person that was at work that Carolyn was referring to? What if him having the conversation right in front of Michael, his guilt was just so overbearing for him that boom, it literally killed him? Going back and looking at the 4 to 5 days of the trial so far, and before what happened to Raymond happened, he was doing an excellent job of making every witness statement look bad, or at the very least look unreliable in a way. Again, the only thing Tommy had going for them was the whole obsession angle. But as far as the episode goes, not much else taken away from an evidence perspective yet again, but I will look at the Barber Art Studio as something that could or could not maybe be important. The kids' involvement, any weight to my theory, will Raymond be dead or alive in next week's episode? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Now, next week's episode is titled The Witness, and a synopsis and a title makes it seem like something big will come to light. As it reads, Rusty is forced to pivot his legal strategy as Tommy receives a disturbing message. Now, first, I would assume that Raymond probably is going to be alive and Maya will most likely replace him, but this message to Tommy, what or who sends him this message, and does it have any effect on this case and Carolyn's death? And is that person going to be the witness of next week's episode? And that's going to be the end of this week's video with a very interesting episode. I'm excited to see what happens next, but more importantly, I want to hear from you all. If you enjoyed yourself, make sure to hit the like button, but more importantly, leave your thoughts, your theories, your deeper meanings that you all took away from this episode, but also share your theories and predictions of what you all hope to see in next week's episode, and make sure to stick around by subscribing to the channel and hitting that notification bell. Thanks again for watching. You all are awesome. Stay safe, and I'll catch you all on the next breakdown.